Welcome to today's webinar on what we expect to see in fundraising and in 2025 with Veritus Group. I'm Karen Kendrick here at Veritus, and I'll be working behind the scenes to help you as we answer your questions today. But before I have our presenters share a little bit more about themselves, I want to take a moment to tell you about how to best use the Zoom system today. So, a couple pointers. Go ahead right now and pop into the chat box where you're from, what organization you work with. We have over 2,500 people signed up for this webinar, so it's a great opportunity to make connections and meet people from around the world. So pop that in. We'd love to hear who you are and where you are. And then because so many folks are here today, we're not able to take your questions live. So please pop those in the Q&A box. So the chat box, let's just chat about commentary on what's going on, what we're seeing. And in the Q&A box, if you'll pop your questions in there, that will really help me keep track and not lose any of them. So I want to make sure that we ask those at the end of the webinar. So just so you know, also, we'll be sending you a link to the recording and a copy of the slide deck via email tomorrow. So let's get started. Jeff.
Karen, thank you. Welcome, everyone. So excited to see you here. I don't know about where you all are, but this morning when I woke up, it was 6 degrees. Not a great start for us, but it's supposed to actually get warmer. I'm in the Philadelphia area, just so everyone knows. And Kendra, you're in Oklahoma, so it might have been a little bit warmer than 6 degrees. But anyway, we're excited about this. I'm probably more excited about this webinar than I've been in one for a long time. I think this is going to be so much fun and insightful. I'm Jeff Schreifels, and I'm principal and owner of Veritus. I've been doing this for over 35 years, working for nonprofits, working for agencies, and for the last 15, almost 16 years now, working with Veritus. And really glad to see you. Kendra.
Yeah, hi everybody. I am loving seeing all the names and locations flooding through the chat. What a big and wonderful group we have today. So happy to be here with you. I am Kendra Loper. I currently serve as the Client Services Director here at Veritus. Have been with Veritus just over a year. But I was just thinking this morning, every time we do a webinar, and if I have the opportunity to be on, I'm thinking about what you're thinking about as frontline fundraisers, as leaders of teams of fundraisers. What's going on? It's January. It's probably cold where you are, and there's, you're reeling. You're still counting gifts from end of year. There's just a lot going on. So preparing for what we think will be important to talk about in 2025 is such an honor, and I'm really excited about it. So glad to be here.
It's exciting to do this with you. Okay, now before we get started on today's topic, I just wanted to share a bit about who we are at Veritus. Some of you on the call may be pretty familiar with us, but for those who aren't, we are passionately relationship focused and grounded in a data-driven approach. And this dynamic is critical to the system, structure, and strategy that we have found to be successful in mid, major, and planned giving programs. Something that I recognized during my time in the direct response world is that data is powerful. So when we found that most major gift programs were missing this critical piece, we knew it had to be an important part of our approach at Veritus. And over the last several years, we've had the opportunity to work with thousands of major gift officers, mid-level officers, and planned giving officers, many on a weekly basis through our consulting work. So we know firsthand how this approach has helped organizations of all sizes and focuses to create authentic donor relationships that will lead to a stronger donor pipeline and ultimately greater net revenue. Also, the lack of data was really concerning to us, and it still amazes us how many nonprofits do not adequately consider the data piece of this work. That's why we've worked so hard to ground our approach in objective fact, not our personal opinion. We've formed our recommendations through insight from analysis of millions of donor records and work with thousands of fundraisers and leaders. And We've gotten to work with some pretty phenomenal organizations over the years who have helped us learn and develop our strategy and approach.
That's right, Jeff. And we're going to be talking about trends today, and this first one, it might actually be the most important piece for us to talk about, and that's really authenticity, right? This is so important in the world we live in today that's becoming more digital, more automated every day. And aren't we all just craving that human connection, that real, authentic relationship with each other? And, while technology offers us a lot of great tools, and we're going to talk about some today, the real success in relational fundraising is really coming through that authenticity, right? In your work with your donors, how you deepen that trust and relationship. So let's talk a little bit about how we're going to lay the groundwork for the authentic relationships. And it's not just in your work. These principles really, they're going to ring true in every area of your life for sure. There's really three main areas that we focus on when we're talking about authentic relationships with our donors. And that's being present, being honest and transparent, and then obviously treating your donor like a human. And let's be honest, treating yourself like a human, right? We're in these relationships as fully formed humans, and we need to think about that as we're talking about how we engage with our donors. So let's talk about being fully present first. What does it mean to be fully present? I want you just for a second to imagine, close your eyes if you need to, but imagine a conversation where recently that you've had with a person that you're talking to who was really fully engaged. Maybe they were leaning in, they were making eye contact, they were not on their phone, they were not looking over their shoulder for the next person to come in, but they were asking questions and furthering that conversation with you. They were really with you. Do you have that in your mind? How do you feel? Probably pretty good, right? So now let's look at the other side of that coin. We've all been in conversations and communication with someone that wasn't fully present with us. They were on their phone. We've got this little computer that we keep right in our hand that's such a distraction all the time. There are a million things going on. Maybe even if we're making eye contact, maybe there's things going on in our mind that we can't shut off. And we're just not focused, right? They're looking around the room to see what else is going on. Maybe you share something with them that was really important and their response was just, yeah, which made you think, oh man, I'm not really sure they're with me. I'm not really sure they're hearing me. I bet you can say that experience didn't feel quite as good as the first experience where you were really with someone who was engaged. So think about that when we're meeting with our donors. We're really hoping to model that first experience. Are we leaned in? Are we curious? Are we thoughtful about our conversation? Are we asking open-ended questions that really allow the donor to respond rather than, these canned responses that we're hoping for? But what's the donor really thinking about? What's on their mind? Are we remaining focused both in what we're saying to the donor, but what we're thinking about? I don't know about you, but sometimes I can be thinking ahead in my mind on, okay, what's the next question I need to be asking? What's my next agenda item? And it takes me out of being present in that moment. So how are we finding ways to really stay present? And and I know the fastest way to get pulled out of being present is when we get triggered or defensive about something, right? So sometimes our conversations with donors, they might actually be sharing some criticism, some constructive criticism, or something maybe they're not super happy with. And finding ways to stay present or really lean in, I find that those conversations are where the gifts happen. I mean, I don't mean revenue gifts, although that can be the case too, but the gift of the relationship is when someone's honest and vulnerable with you to share something maybe they're not super happy about. So stay present in those moments. Be really intentional about your engagement in those moments. All right, be honest. Boy, is this one important, right? We live in a world where honesty is not always the highest value for everyone, but we know for our donors and for our relationship, it's one of the most important pieces of being honest and vulnerable and transparent about what we as an organization are doing and can do together in our partnership. And when you open that door with a donor, you want to be able to match your actions with your words. You don't want to promise something, overpromise something that the organization cannot deliver on. You want to really take the opportunity to use that honesty and that transparency in any moment to build trust and rapport. We all make mistakes, right? Raise your hand if you've made a mistake this week. We've got to own it. We've got to be able to say, man, I flubbed this up and I want a chance to be able to make it right. When I think about that, I think about those oops emails that we all get, right? When somebody forgets a link or they put something wrong in an email and they quickly send you that oops second email. Often those are the emails that get the most attention because number one, it signals, hey, I need to be paying attention to this. But number two, that someone was willing to say, man, I messed up and let me correct that. So think about that as you're being honest and transparent with your donors. We lose our slides? There we go.
There we go.
All right. Being human. That's our last point here. And, I think about this on both sides of the coin, both you as the fundraiser and that donor. Remember, we're whole people coming into these conversations. We've got lives and work and families and hobbies and everything that goes beyond the relationship that donor may have with your organization. So don't forget when you're talking to that donor that you're working with a real person. They may have things going on in their lives that's, keeping them from being focused on your organization. And you, as the fundraiser, you're frustrated because they're not returning your call or your email, but maybe they're caring for an elderly parent. Maybe they're celebrating. They have a kid who's graduating from high school and getting ready to go off to college. There's a lot going on in their lives. So how can you bring that human component into your relationship? One, a sense of humor. I think that's one of the best ways to really level set. I had a donor one time that we discovered we both liked silly animal memes. And so we started exchanging just every once in a while, just a crazy animal meme. And it had nothing to do with the work of our organization, but it was just all about us connecting on a human level. And it was just light and fun. Obviously you want to actively listen when you're with that donor. When you have the opportunity to be on the phone or in person with a donor or even through email, they may share little tidbits of things that are going on in their life. Maybe they're late to your meeting. You're sitting there checking your watch and they walk in the door flustered. Something obviously is going on for them. And, if they take the time to tell you what's going on, listen and be present, be honest and vulnerable in that moment. And, be thoughtful. Maybe you have an agenda for what you hope to get through in that conversation that day, but they've got something else going on that's much more present for them and pressing. Be flexible. You might not walk out of that meeting or that conversation with the donor with what you thought, but maybe you walk out with something better, which is a deepened, even more trusting relationship because they've taken the time to really share with you something going on in their lives. And, again, as I mentioned, this is all going back to seeing that donor as a true human. Are you seeing them like you would want to be seen if you were on the other side of that table? Mm-hmm. So let's talk about, wrapping this up here with really what donors want. And to be honest, this is what all of us want, right? We want to be known. We want to feel like we're understood. We want to feel valued. Do you see your donors as true partners in your organization? Are you really valuing them? And they really want to feel needed, right? Why is their support important to your organization? What is their partnership changing in the world? We all want this, this feeling of being valued. And so again, we want you to see your donors as humans. And I want to tell you a really quick story. One of our coaches just shared with a fundraiser who was working with a donor, and that donor was actually sharing some constructive criticism, something that they weren't super happy with in the organization. It wasn't something that the fundraiser could change, but the fundraiser was really intentional, leaned in, listened, took good notes, and made that donor understand that they were really valued and that their perspective was valued. And what resulted, surprised the gift officer, but what resulted from that was that deepened relationship and trust. And their next gift was more than double the gift they gave the previous year. And you just never know. The donor doesn't always need you to make the change. It's about listening to what their perspective is and what they think about the work that you're doing. And if you do that and value the donor as a human, you're going to go miles down the road for sure.
Yes.
Thank you, Kendra. I'm jumping in here real quick. I've had a couple people jumping in and saying, is this the trends webinar? So Jeff, speak to, this is a trends webinar and why we started with authenticity.
Yeah, this is the trends webinar. And I would say this trend, being authentic in 2025, is probably the most important. Being real with your donors. Donors need to trust you and your organization. And everything that Kendra has talked about is critical to grow your mid, major, and planned giving program in 2025. We are now living in a post-truth world, whether we like it or not. And this is why you, as the fundraiser, need to be more real and authentic than ever. And being vulnerable is a real value that we should hold high as you think about how to effectively build your relationship fundraising program in 2025. And this is why we put this as the #1 trend. Being authentic and real with your donors, because ultimately donors are going to engage with you and give more when they can trust you and your organization. And so that's why 2025, this is so big. Now, I know it's a little strange to transition from authentic relationships to technology, but when done well, AI and other optimizations can support you in creating those meaningful relationships while saving time and energy. So that's the second one. So there are 3 main areas that we see our clients focusing on right now, and where we would recommend you look as you integrate more technology tools into your fundraising efforts. They include data, things like analytics, modeling, and AI, automations, and collaboration. The opportunities with technology and AI specifically are truly endless. And here are just a few ideas we've seen be successful with some of our clients. They've used modeling to support tiering and segmenting donors, and use various data analysis to help identify those top prospects for the qualification pool. So in other words, they're looking at their entire database and using that model to identify donors who have maybe not yet given a mid or major gift, but have shown through the model their capacity and propensity to give higher gifts, and then moving them into a qualification pool, not putting them into a portfolio, but a qualification pool. And that is very important. So a lot of organizations are doing modeling, and, a lot of direct response data companies are promoting all these different models, and they're great. The key is, what are you going to do once you've done that modeling project? What are you going to do with those donors? And a lot of nonprofits are making the mistake of immediately putting them into major gift portfolios and asking major gift officers to start generating revenue from these donors. And we're saying, no, that's not what you want to do. You want to have a complete strategy of qualifying those people to really decide, do they even want that relationship with you first? So that's #1. They've used AI to create templates for various letters, scripts, and touch points to make customization easier and faster. They've used AI to analyze past interactions and create summaries, which can help in identifying potential interest areas if you're new to working with that donor. They've used AI to provide suggestions for framing and language that can be used to ask for a gift in an authentic way. And lastly, they've used AI to help create strategic plans for your portfolios, which can really help shorten your planning time. So there's a number of ways that you can use AI to help shorten up your planning, knowing about a donor, all of that information, coming up with scripts and letters, anything that can help you give you more time to develop those relationships in an authentic way with a donor. Now, of course, with anything new, there's always some things to keep mindful of. And here's some considerations you need to make with new technology. The effort to gain enough skill to use them effectively. So if you've been using AI, you know that to be effective, it's all about what do you put into the prompt, right? So using a good prompt is critical with AI. And there are a lot of resources out there that already exist to help with some of this, but you need to invest time to learn them. The other thing you need to be considering of is data privacy. It's always a concern, especially for any open forum. And you'll want to be very mindful what information you give to AI and ensure that you are in line with your organization's security protocols. And lastly, it's important to remember that technology may always be on, but your team members can't be. So sometimes you have too much of a good thing. So just make sure that you're being thoughtful about what you pursue and how you pursue it, remembering that your team are not always machines. They're not. So if you've been around for a while, you've probably heard us talk about donor value attrition as a key metric we look at. And we still think this is an incredibly important piece of information every nonprofit should be looking at. But there's another trend we're noticing in recent donor assessments: a lack of upgrading and engagement with a donor. In a healthy donor pipeline, obstacles are removed so donors can give to their full potential. But unfortunately, this is not what is happening in most organizations. Here's an example of a donor pipeline that is not healthy. One of the major issues here is a clear clog at the 250 to 499 range and the 1,000 to 4,099 ranges. What we can clearly see is that there's a serious issue with upgrading donors. For this organization, their imbalance was due to an overinvestment in annual and direct response and a lack of investment in relational fundraising. But there are a lot of reasons you could see a pipeline analysis like this for your own organization. There's a lot of reasons for why there's clogs, and you can figure that out by doing this kind of pipeline analysis. Now, I want to say right at the start here that I came up in the direct response world, and a core principle of ours here at Veritus is that direct response and annual giving programs are critically important parts of your fundraising program. But they can be misused or used as crutches that will harm long-term growth and revenue. When you are operating from an individual giving mindset, you're really focused on the money. In organizations that have had this mindset, you'll see things like fundraising strategies being made into departments, which is what happens a lot in membership and sponsorship programs. And you'll have a system that creates obstacles in the donor pipeline. Or you may have more competition, or at a minimum, metrics that do not support donors moving from one fundraising discipline to another as they begin to give more to the organization. Yet, when you're working from a relationship-focused perspective where the donor partnership is prioritized, your goal is to help the donor give to their full potential. You will have systems in place to deepen the donor's connection to the organization and ensure they are in the right fundraising program for their level of giving and interest. You will have KPIs that support and encourage donor movement. And you will be giving more donors the opportunity to regularly give in ways that align with their interests, which will increase the number of donors who upgrade their giving. So, what challenges occur for organizations that get stuck in this annual giving mindset instead of a relationship-focused one? So here are some of the common ones we hear about. Donors have been trained to give the same amount each year, and fundraisers are unsure how to break them out of it. Similarly, donors have been trained to give at specific times of year, like year-end, and fundraisers don't have the tools to start having conversation with donors about giving at other times of the year. Donors are often not well educated on the impact their gift is making, so they don't go above and beyond what they're already giving. In some cases, especially in workplace giving, and sponsorship programs, there might be delays in getting information to report back to the donor on their gift, or in some cases, that their gift was even received. And lastly, the organization is lacking in offers that would help the donor envision how they could make a greater impact on the program they care about. And we'll talk about this later in the presentation. Now, how do you address this, specifically if your organization is reliant on a membership, sponsorship, or workplace giving program? Because we've seen this as a significant trend, and I'm going to walk you through some of the strategies we use with our clients to support upgrading, specifically for donors stuck in an annual giving level because they're part of a membership, sponsorship, or even a workplace giving program. Here's a system that mirrors our standard qualification process for major donors that we've adapted to help you move some of those newly acquired donors from their membership to a deeper level of giving. We use this regularly with clients to help them identify those donors who are interested in partnering with the organization beyond their membership or commitment with you. It's important when upgrading donors and when implementing systems like the one I just described that you have the right expectation. In our standard qualification process, we see on average 1 in 3 donors who meet your major gift criteria will actually say yes to a deeper relationship and become qualified, which means they can move then on to an MGO's caseload. When it comes to donors acquired through membership, sponsorship, or workplace giving, though, these donors are different. Because of how they were acquired, you should expect a lower qualification rate than 1 to 3. Your metric of success is also different. Here, the goal is to identify what I like to call mission or mission plus donors. These are donors who are interested in more purposeful partnership with you and your organization beyond the regular annual commitment. We implement this strategy differently for donors who are new to the program and for those who are already in it. For any donors already in your membership program, you can give them increased opportunities to increase their giving by providing impactful donor offers that are aligned to their interest areas, if you know them. And you can build trust with them by beginning to introduce them to the idea of what a partnership with you really looks like. This is accomplished through the various touch points in the qualification system I shared. You can also be intentional about sharing all the things your organization does so that they can better understand your donors' passions and interests, and then connect their communication strategy to those areas. We really recommend that you give existing donors a bit longer to qualify beyond just the alternative qualification series, because you are going through a relearning process with them. And ideally, if you don't qualify through the series, you can move these donors into a mid-level caseload for a year to see if they will engage during that time before releasing them. With new donors who are joining your membership, sponsorship, or workplace giving programs, which we aren't recommending you stop, by the way, you'll use that alternative qualification process as well. The difference here is that you're integrating it with your initial phase of supporting your organization. And if they don't qualify, you can release them back into the membership-only donor, for example. With all of this, it's critical that you set up a system for tracking so that you can show the impact of your work to upgrade donors and untangle some of the knots that you've been keeping donors in from giving to their full potential. The application of this will differ based on your database, but here's an idea of what it could look like and what to capture. So you can see, you want separate codes for sponsorship or membership only, sponsorship plus mission, and you want to create a system of tracking, converting the donor from sponsorship to a mission donor, and the donors who've engaged within the length of the program and those that didn't engage to better understand your own qualification area.
That's so good, Jeff. Those really tactical pieces of strategy I think are going to be really helpful moving forward. So let's talk about this last key trend that we're really focusing on for 2025. It's
big.
It is big. Donor offers, right? Donor offers are a key strategy in how your organization can raise more money. So at Veritus, we call this the donor impact portfolio, or DIP. You might have heard us talking about DIP, or donor impact portfolio. So let's go ahead and go to that next slide so they can see here that we have in our approach, we take a two-step approach that will really allow you to create impactful offers at various giving levels for your donors. So you can see here that we start with categorizing the programs and then creating a donor offer with a price tag with for each service area. So let's dig in and get a little more into the weeds. In phase one, our process is to create a spreadsheet of your program categories and subcategories, and sometimes subcategories for your organization. And really the goal of this process is to get a financial picture of the need for each of your program areas. And this requires a really key partnership with your financial team and your program team, but it's so important. And it really helps you, again, establish that culture of philanthropy where we're all working together to create these donor offers. So something that is really important to note here is that the process that we have is not intended to change any financial coding. So your financial folks can take a deep breath. We're not changing how they are looking at managing the budget. The goal here is to get specific numbers so that the fundraising team can use these to create donor offers. Remember, we talked about being honest and transparent and vulnerable. This is how we do that. We really get specific about the work that your organization is doing. And this process also involves not just your program budget, but the allocation of overhead. So what does it cost to really manage and run these programs, to keep the lights on, to pay your staff? That program category, so that donors can see really what's the true cost, not just the programmatic cost, but incorporating that overhead cost. And one thing I want to note here, since we won't really have time to dig into the specifics today of this process is also not intended to create a bunch of restricted gifts. In our approach to donor offers, we use equivalency language to connect the donor's interest without restricting the gift. And I'm going to share an example of that here in a second when we get to the breakout information. So this is a big spreadsheet. I know it's overwhelming to look at. This is our donor impact portfolio, or DIP spreadsheet. And as a reminder, we're going to share these slides with you probably tomorrow. So if you can't get the full picture of it today, don't worry, you'll get a chance to really drill down. But I want you to see here that this budget is broken down into different program categories, identified. You can see here in that orange expenses section, that's where your budget and overhead allocation shows up. And then in that blue revenue section, that's the revenue that's come in, or those committed gifts towards that work so far. And then that last column, that's really important. That green column under that black arrow there, you can see that's the true need, what's left to be funded. And in this particular example, there's a lot of program areas that have a lot left to be funded and some that already have some committed gifts. So let's look at the breakout of this. And, in this particular organization here, we have the summer programming cost with some specific program information that will help us create those cost breakouts for the donor offers. So in this case, the total program cost is $278,000. And then what we've done is we've created 4 different giving levels to align with donors at different stages of giving, because not everyone's going to be at the top of that funnel or at the bottom. Where do they fall? What makes sense for that donor? So going back to that equivalency language that I mentioned, here's an example in this case. So for instance, your gift of $3,100 is the equivalent of supporting one student in this summer program. So this still ties to a real and honest and true budget number and the impact, but it doesn't restrict the gift to that area. It just tells them, okay, by giving this amount, your gift is the equivalent of this type of support. So in phase 2, this is the second part of our donor impact portfolio process, and it's what we call the donor offer toolkit. So based on the information that we just mapped out in phase 1 that you saw in that big spreadsheet, we map out the top areas of interest for your donors. And initially, you won't do this for every program area in your organization. So you want to be really thoughtful about the areas that you choose. So our process is you'll gather that necessary program information, again, working across the organization with the different areas in your organization, particularly program in this case, collecting those visuals. Sometimes that's your marketing team, sometimes that's directly from your program team to illustrate what the need really looks like. You're going to draft a toolkit document with all of these resources built in and the cost breakouts, everything all included right in that toolkit. And then when you're ready to build a proposal, a specific proposal for that donor, you've got all of that information right there in the toolkit. And this is so key. Be sure to keep that toolkit updated, because as we know, budgets change, programs change, and you want to keep that updated so that it's ready to go when you're ready. And the beautiful thing about this process is you can use this tool again and again to create as many donor offers in all different forms: letters, emails, full proposals, slide decks. Once you have the components, the sky's really the limit. So let's talk about the components. It's important to note that as you take your donor toolkits to build those donor offers, or program toolkits to build your donor offers, you want to ensure your offer is compelling and persuasive, and it's in its story for support. It needs to really be based in the problem that you're solving, that societal problem, what the funding gap is, and how that donor, through your organization, can close that gap and really create change in your community and in the community that your organization is serving. So a compelling offer must connect the impact of your organization's work with the passion of that donor. So just saying it another way, just to make sure we drive this home, a donor offer must, in both human and emotional terms, remember we talked about that donor is a human, right? So how do we pull them in with a human and emotional terms to state the need in the most compelling way we can? We've got to also offer a believable solution. What are we going to do to solve that problem? And then persuade the donor to take action through a donation. So let's think about how we know if a donor offer at the end of the day is a good one. You might have some that you're evaluating, or when you're thinking about this process, if you're unsure if your offer is going to have the impact that you want it to and be really meaningful to that donor, we want you to ask these 4 questions as just a simple gut check. Is your offer clear? Does it demand attention? What is that compelling need? Is it convincing? And does it connect to the heart? Again, back to that human donor that really cares deeply about the work of your organization. And if you can answer yes to all 4 of these questions, then you're ready to present that offer to the donor.
That's good stuff. I want to say a little bit more about these donor offers. It's very much tied into upgrading donors and knowing all the programs and projects that you have at your organization and how much they actually cost is so important for you as a frontline fundraiser, because now you have the tools to be able to go to donors with something tangible and real. That goes up to being authentic and real with donors. Having this information about everything that your nonprofit does is so important. And this is why it's a huge trend for 2025, because if building authentic relationships that build trust and then can upgrade your donor from their giving today to what it could be this year and many years in the future, is all tied into this part right here of understanding in a very tangible way of what you're doing. So what we're seeing when new clients are coming in, they're asking, we need to do this project with you of figuring out all of our projects and programs, because right now our frontline fundraisers are just basically being able to ask for general operating funds, or just because we're such a great organization, they should give to us. Well, unfortunately, that is very rare for a donor to give to. I mean, we'd all love donors to say, here's $100,000, do whatever you need to do with it. That's just not going to happen. And the reality is, if you want to grow your relationship with your donors in 2025, You have to have tangible, inspiring offers for them. And this process of figuring that out with your organization is going to be critical this year if you want to grow. Okay, so all right. So we've talked to you about some of the top trends we're looking at in mid and major gifts this year. And now before we get into our time for questions, I want you to know that we want to help you build transformational relationships with your donors and bring these trends into your strategy and approach for 2025. There's a major reason why we created the Veritus Group Academy and why I wanted to share that our first round of the certification courses for 2025 starts on February 10th. Here's a quote from one of our Veritus Group alumni about the value of this information that she got from the Veritus Group Academy and how it helped raise more money for her organization. So, if you're ready to say yes to your personal and professional development as a fundraiser, then you're in luck because we're running a special discount on our February certification courses right now. For the next week, you can get 10% off when you register using the code on the screen. And we know a lot of organizations have had budget constraints, which is why I wanted to make sure you knew about this discount now. So, Karen, now would be a great time to start answering questions. Karen, are you there?
I'm coming. I have so much happening that I'm trying to keep up. This is so cool. I had so many things to click to get here. I have so many great questions. Thank you all. Fantastic conversation in the chat, a lot of connection and resources, and many, many, many good questions. So I'm going to start at the bottom and go up since it kind of relates to what we just talked about.
Okay.
All right, let's see. When you're referring to sponsorship donors, do you mean those who are sponsoring fundraising events or something else? I had a little confusion about what you all meant by that, Jeff.
No, we're talking about like members. Some people call them sponsors or monthly givers or such. Yes, not corporations that are sponsoring events or anything like that.
Okay, cool. Kendra, one thing I always get confused by is if we're telling folks a unit type of cost, are we supposed to tell them if it is maintaining or additive? Although I suppose that depends on the agency and their ability to help us as a frontline fundraisers. So because if we say it's additive, then the program tends to deliver, needs to deliver and back it up. So I think there's some confusion about like, how do we talk about restricted, unrestricted, directive? How do we do that when we're really showing the cost of things and the need, but the tracking of that's the issue. Like, what are we really saying we're doing here?
Goodness, I'm trying to think what they're really trying to get at there with the answer.
Well, I could jump in if you want a little more time to think.
Sure.
All of this is around your complete entire operating budget. So think about this. What is your total operating budget for your organization? Let's just say it's $5 million. Everything you do adds up into that $5 million. Every program and project you have is that full operating cost, including the overhead that makes it happen. And so what you want to do, and what most organizations don't do, is try to figure out, well, what do these programs actually cost with the overhead allocated for that entire year for the programs? So everything that you're asking for is part of your current operating budget. It's not anything extra outside of your budget. This is all about the programs and projects you have now at different dollar handles. So a lot of organizations say, well, these donors have been giving the same amount every year, and we just been basically asking them for general operating support. This allows you to have some big offers. When your manager or the CEO is like, why aren't we getting big gifts? My answer to them is, you're not getting big gifts because you're not asking them for big things. And you're not showing them a vision about what you do. You have $1 million asks, but you don't craft an offer around those $1 million asks. And so this is really important. It's not the extra stuff that you're doing. This is all around your general operating budget. The extra stuff is easy to figure out because it's an odd extra program, and you know what that costs. You know what overhead you can allocate towards it. But this is all encompassing of your current operating.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't add anything to that other than to say this is what donors are looking for at that level, right? They are looking for that specificity around what does it really cost you to run this program, not just what you're looking at in terms of the budget for, the pencils and, whatever it is for the program cost, but what does it look like? What's the impact on your organization? And how can I help you make that long transformational difference?
I had a story the other day about an organization where the MGO had a donor that said they wanted to give a $500,000 gift. And it was for a project that's within their operating budget, but they didn't know how to craft it. They didn't know how to talk about this program that they had. And so what happened was it wasn't available. So the MGO is running around with their head cut off, trying to figure out, going to finance, going to program, trying to figure out, well, how can we put together a $500,000 offer? This should already be done. That work should already be there so that the major gift officer, when she hears a donor saying, I really want to give a $500,000 gift, and she knows the donor's passions and interests, should be able to say, well, I have this offer for $500,000 and this one for $500,000. These are both things that you care passionately about. Which one do you want to talk more about?
So back to the original question, I'll do a quick answer. I think there's some confusion about, we're not saying that all of these asks would be restricted giving, because folks are concerned
None
about
of them.
how they track.
None of these asks are restricted.
This is about directed giving, or it's equivalent to.
That is correct.
Right?
That is correct.
So I can say, for $50,000, it's equivalent to taking care of this many kids in camp. It's not exactly that you're going to do 50 kids in camp, right? So that really helps with the tracking. And then you probably have policies around larger gifts and how that might be restricted. So there's a number of questions. I'm going to start with you, Jeff. This is from Glenn. We're seeing changes in our world, elections, economic uncertainty, cost of living, that are affecting people's attitudes toward giving, with people having less cash to give. I'd like to get your insight on what trends you are seeing in relation where you see the industry heading as a whole, what impact these external impacts will have on charities, and any strategies or opportunities we could use to address that. And there's a couple other comments from folks around seeing some giving go down. So talk a little bit about that.
So there are things that are not in our control as fundraisers. We cannot control the economy. We can't control all kinds of things related to the inflation or world events. What we can control is our relationships with our donors and how we build them and bring them into a real partnership with us. Those organizations that are taking the time to build authentic relationships with their donors are the ones that survive through tough times, because those donors are engaged with them. They will be with them in hard times and in good times. And we've seen those organizations that have a really robust mid and major gift program weather those storms. The economy affects, a lot of new donor acquisition, direct response, but in major gifts, if you have those true authentic relationships, we see less of an impact when other things are going outside. Now, the only thing that you can control is what you do with those donors. And of course, we at Veritus believe you got to have a plan for every donor. You got to tier your donors. You got to have a revenue goal, all of that, so that you're staying consistent and persistent and patient with your donors. If you're doing that, if you're working your plan as a fundraiser, that's all you can do. Everything else is outside of your control. Everything else. But if you can build those authentic relationships, you can weather any of those outside forces.
It's been interesting. There's been a whole conversation, I can't even keep up with it all, about how this isn't talking about trends. So I think people had in their minds that trends means something else than what we're talking about. Then there's other folks saying this is really helpful. So talk a little bit, Jeff, on why you see this as trends and maybe why people may have expected something else when they think about a trends webinar.
Well, when I see some of the, I see on LinkedIn, the top 5 trends, and I look at the trends and they're all the same thing. Build better relationships, AI, modeling, all that. And we talked about how important technology is going to continue to be with mid and major gift fundraising. But the real big trend is going from transactional to transformational relationships with your donors. Every nonprofit that we've been working with over the last 10 years, 15 years, have all been trying to figure out how they go from transactional to transformational. And it's every year that ratchets it up in importance. Because what's happening in overall is that the direct response acquisition, it's getting harder, it's more costly, and people are realizing we need other revenue sources. So they're turning to mid and major gifts to try to figure that out. And the problem is they don't know how to do mid and major gifts that well. And that's okay, because we haven't been doing it well for many, many years in our sector. And so the overall trend here is why we're talking about authenticity, tools that help you create that, upgrading your donors, and having real donor offers that helps them upgrade those gifts. Those are the trends in 2025 you need to start following and doing with your organization if you want to see your revenue grow from your donors, if you want to see more engagement with your donors, if you want to see less donor attrition and less donor value attrition. These are the trends that if you actually implement, you will see greater engagement and more revenue from your donors.
Thank you, Jeff.
I would just jump in to say, we only have so much time in our day as fundraisers, right? And then leading teams of fundraisers. And there's every shiny ball out there that you can imagine around, try this, try this, try this, try this. And what we know to be true is what Jeff has said. When you really deepen those relationships and you take the time, and that's where you prioritize your time over, trying X, Y, or Z, because that's the latest new thing out there. That's where you're going to see results. And maybe some of those trends stick around and they become useful tools, certainly. But really, it starts and ends with relationship.
Thank you all. Some interesting questions about, how do you ask donors for sort of capacity building, to add staff, to support, building out an infrastructure, talk about that, Jeff, starting with you.
It's first of all, it's knowing your donor. Not every donor wants to give to capacity building. They may not understand it. They may not want to support that. They want to do something very tangible, really that they feel directly relates to your mission. But there are donors within your portfolios that do want to give to capacity building. Your job as a fundraiser is to know who those donors are and start building that relationship and start talking about that particular type of offer. And so that's how we help our folks really try to figure out, well, what do our donors want? We got to ask them. We got to find out who they are. What are their passions and interests? That's the whole game here for a frontline fundraiser, is figuring out the donor's passions and interests as it relates to all of your programs and projects and needs of your organization so that you can match those up. And when you can do that, we will see giving and engagement with your donors go way up. So that's how you do it. You find those donors that actually care about it. It's not going to be every donor, I will tell you. It could be a very few. But some of those donors really understand it. They understand the investment it takes to get something bigger.
Kendra, how would you ask a donor about their capacity to give?
I always start with a donor about, using what we call permission-based asking and trying to understand what is it that you care most deeply about, right? Jeff talked about this. How can I help you make sure that you have the information you need to leave the impact you want to leave with your philanthropic giving? What can I do to make sure that you have that information? And then begin to have those deeper conversations. But first, I've got to get to know them. I've got to build trust. They have to know that what I'm sharing with them is real and true and authentic and honest. And then we begin to have the conversations around, particularly if I think it's a donor who may have interest in supporting capacity. Well, what does it look like in our organization to really support this program? It costs X, Y, and Z to do this, but I may also have staff that need to run that program, and we've got to pay them. And more and more donors are really leaning into those conversations around what's the whole picture look like. That's the whole process that we have built into our donor impact portfolio, is what does the whole picture look like, and help me understand how your organization is doing this work and how I can be a part of that. And when we really think about donors as that true partner rather than just a funding mechanism, like what does it look like? Well, how does it change the conversation when this is a partner versus just a donor?
So in that conversation, then you can ask questions like, we have opportunities in these ranges. What matches your vision? What are you interested in doing? What would you like to be involved in at what level? So you can ask open-ended questions that help you get to, I think the question was also like, how do we get to like what they're capable of giving? You can have a range of offers and put them in front of them and have a discussion, and then get to more of that detail.
Yeah.
This question, Jeff, says, Veritus is uniquely data-driven in its approaches. So what research, hard numbers are out there sourced from where? So when we say we're data-driven, where's our data from? And, we talk about trends and we talk about data. Where's that coming from?
That comes from all the organizations that we have done a data analysis on. So typically, before we engage with any client, we ask to see their data so we can see what's going on. How are their donors behaving? And then what's possible with their donor base. And so over the last, 16 years, we've looked at over 1,000 nonprofits database. And so we can see the trends of donor attrition, donor value attrition. We can see like that donor pipeline where the clogs are in those pipelines. We can see, how many donors are giving the same amount, what percentage of the donor file are giving the same or nearly the same every year. And that's why we've been seeing that ratio go up and up year over year. So we see a lot of donors giving, very loyal donors, but they're giving the same amount. And we see that in all the data assessments that we do. So I would say a year, we probably do close to 100 data assessments every year. And so that's where we get our data from.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the chat box. That's free as well. So if you all are interested. Kendra, talk a little bit about what if someone is a small nonprofit? We have folks that are in rural areas. They're one-person shop. Where do they start? How do they think about these trends and needing more than ever to really build that relational fundraising in your organization?
Oh gosh, lots of places to start. Well, first, let me just say, if you haven't been on our website, we provide so many resources for free. So if there's a particular topic or support you need in a certain area, but you're not quite ready to make the jump, start there. Take a look. We've got blogs and podcasts and, a variety of resources that you can use. And that's when I started in a small shop, that's where I started. I started what's out there and available for me to digest so that I can understand what's happening in the world. And then I just really, it goes back to those basics. No matter what size organization you're in, it's still built on relationships. So if you have a small donor base or a ginormous donor base, you still have to know your donors. And so how do you do that? Conversation. getting to know them, introducing yourself. Have you started with an introduction to say, hi, I'm your point of contact. I'd love to answer questions for you. How can I, and keep showing up. Your donors, not every donor wants that kind of two-way communication and that engagement, but there's a whole host of your donors that do. By making a gift, they've already said yes to your organization. So how can you continue to build that relationship, cultivate the relationship? So you just start with the simple introduction, conversation. Let me get to know you. Let me hear more about you and what you want to do, what kind of impact you want to make in this organization. And it's just little by little, even in a small shop, as a shop of one, and I've been that person, it takes time. There's no silver bullet. It's not a fast process by any means, but little by little, as you build those relationships, deepen the trust, you're going to find that you'll know who those donors are that are really going to lean into the process with you.
All right. Thank you. Jeff, you want final words before I close this out? This has been a great conversation. I've got a lot of nice comments here.
Yeah. I think the key for 2025 and going on forward is you have to be able to engage your donors. You have to be able to know your donors because your donors want to be known. And when they are known, they will engage further with you. They will give at greater gifts because when they're known, they'll know that because you understand their passions and interests, and you're bringing them inspiring offers for them to change the world. And that's what donors want to do. That's hard work. It's easy to say, but it's a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of investment into those things because you have to figure that out. What are all those programs and projects? And then after the donor gives a gift, you have to figure out what is the impact those gifts are making. Very important, but it's hard work. But if you stick with it, that is the future of fundraising. Making those connections with donors. And we want to be here to help you do that. So hopefully we're able to help you a little bit to hear about where we want to go. But if you need other help, we're here as well.
Thank you, Jeff. So thank you for being with us today and for sharing your great questions and all your great commentary and your great connections. I hope you all had made some new friends today. As a reminder, you'll receive a recording of this webinar and a copy of the slide deck tomorrow. And as always, we're available to assist you with any questions by email at hello@veritusgroup.com. Everyone have a great day and take care.